I got to talk some Springsteen in 2017. So, and we'll save it to the end of this segment because he is a Springsteen aficionado, but he's also one of the best sports writers in America. A very decorated man of writings, as they say. Now working for NBC, and you can follow his journey out on Twitter. And tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, do at Jay Posnanski. He's their national columnist in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now back covering baseball, amongst other things. But the reason I'm calling you Joe Posnanski is not Born to Run. It's not Australia and New Zealand with the boss in February. It's actually Lefty Driesell. I mean, you wrote this piece that's being shared among sports writers about Lefty Driesell and how he'll never get into the Hall of Fame. And it's earthed itself now. And, we're honoring Lefty on February 11th at College Park. I found this out earlier in the week. So there's like a whole movement about, like, get Lefty in, kind of like there was for Phil Rizzuto at some point, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar. I think there's a real sense that it's been a little bit of an injustice that Lefty hasn't been, elected to the Hall of Fame. All those wins and all of the great moments for him, and if you're going to put coaches in the Hall of Fame, and there are lots and lots of coaches in the Basketball Hall of Fame, it's kind of hard to see how you can leave Lefty Driesell out, considering not only how successful he was. 4 different programs, none of them with any history, but also how influential he was, the guy who really started March Madness and, Midnight Madness, and, somebody who I think just was one of the great characters of the game in addition to being one of the great coaches. He should be in the Hall of Fame. I hope that there is some momentum. I sense that there is a little momentum, but we'll have to see how that goes.
Lefty was all I knew, right? So, the games used to come in Baltimore on Channel 45, which you had to have the rabbit ears for. And, I remember watching the Graham game down in North Carolina. But, you spent a formative period of your life in North Carolina, right? So, Lefty was a big part of that whole thing going on with Dean down there. And long before Valvano even got to North Carolina State.
There's no question. I think you look at the ACC from, say, 1971 to 72, right around when David Thompson came to NC State, and you follow it all the way through to when Michael Jordan left in the mid-'80s. That Lefty was there that whole time, and not wasn't just there, but was there with fantastic teams. I think some of those teams in the 70s might have won a national championship if it had been a situation where 64 teams got in. And
by the way, David Thompson was my first Darth Vader. Just so you know, I was 5 years old. He was the bad guy, hitting his head on the rim. McMillan, Lucas, Elmer. I'm very, very familiar with that. And it scarred me, Joe. It made me a sports writer for my whole life.
Well, having grown up in Cleveland, I know all about scarring and losing and all of that. But no, you're right. I think David Thompson. I think you look back. I think David Thompson has a very strong argument as the greatest college basketball player ever. And it was kind of David Thompson single-handedly that kept that great Tom McMillan, Len Elmore, John Lucas team in 1975 from even going to the tournament where they might have won it. They were that good. That was the years that NC State did win it, and obviously it was still a great UCLA team. But Lefty had great teams throughout the 70s and into the 80s, but he had great teams at Davidson in the 60s, and he brought victories to James Madison and Georgia State. He was a great coach, and that's what the Hall of Fame is. And you look at the coaches in there, he belongs with those people who are there.
I missed the press conferences. Well, I know you know. Hell, I don't know.
Still one of the greats.
Oh man,
great storyteller.
When he would talk about Leonard Bias, and for me, I'm kind of shocked he's not in the Hall of Fame. And I guess this is where I'm getting to be an old guy, Joe. And as a kid, my cousin's in Cooperstown, right? So Cooperstown was always this big part of my life, and now Canton, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I know all the voters, and I'm there at the Super Bowl every year, and I'm in that mix where I have these conversations. And the steroid part of baseball has made the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I know you write about that all the time, and you're involved in all that. But these other Hall of Fames, as crooked, as corrupt, as crazy as I think Cooperstown, as sort of exclusive and weird as I think Canton is, and that Art Modell's not in Canton, and that certain people are Marvin Miller's never going to get in Cooperstown because they hated him. I look at it and say, who's doing the voting? Always. And none of these things are a level playing field in any of these Hall of Fames. And they're all very political, and they've all become, even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, you got to sort of pay to play to some degree. That's one of the things that concerns me is over the next 25 years, what are my grandkids going to think about sports halls of fame, and are they going to care about them?
Well, it's a great question, and they are political. I think we forget that it's been political forever, right? I mean, the reason Harvard is called Harvard is not because they loved a guy named Harvard. It was because that guy gave them a lot of money.
But we didn't know how the sausage was made 50 years ago. We were just like, look at that plaque; it's shiny. He must have been good, right?
Yeah, I think it's really hard, and even if they were perfectly done, you'd still have that line where people are below it and everybody's upset, and people are above it. And people wonder how those guys got in. I think the thing about the Basketball Hall of Fame, you hit on right at the beginning of what you were saying there. I think most people think that Lefty's in. I talk to people all the time, and I say, it's a shame Lefty Drizel's not in, and that's their first reaction. It's like, oh, I thought he was. How could Lefty Drizel not be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, it's just sort of the reaction. And I think Basketball Hall of Fame is particularly weird. I mean, Baseball Hall of Fame, it's the biggest, it's the most famous. It's the one where people know generally who's in and who's out. I mean, it's not like you go up to anybody and say, Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. And people will say to you, oh, I didn't know he wasn't. I mean,
nobody's confused about Pete Rose not being in at this point, right?
Exactly. So I think it's weird with the Basketball Hall of Fame. He's back on the ballot. I think he's got a great chance this time around. He was a finalist last year. And it'd be fitting for him to finally go to the Hall of Fame.
He is Joe Posnanski. He's one of my favorites. I don't have him on often enough, but it's always a pleasure when we do. For the Basketball Hall of Fame, how does it work? I don't. Literally, I don't know. I mean, I'm one of those guys that if Angelos hadn't taken my press pass 10 years ago, I probably would have a Baseball Hall of Fame ballot because I had a press pass for 21 years and covered the team everywhere they went. The football team, I've been on the beat 21 years, and that's a smaller club. It's like sort of one from every city. I'm certainly moving into the place where 10 years from now, I could be the qualified guy to be that guy here. The basketball thing, it never comes to me. I never hear about it. I don't know much about what goes on with the Hockey Hall of Fame either. I don't know, dude. I'm getting older and I'm jaded, and I've done this for 32 years. I'm a little sour on all of it, quite frankly. I don't know if I were asked to vote whether I would, because I feel like all you guys who do vote, it's a pain in the ass, quite frankly, now that the internet's open,
It's definitely different. I mean, look, I still think it's an honor to vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame, but I've given up other things. I really have. I mean, not just because I feel like it's a mess up. I used to vote for the Heisman. I don't vote for the Heisman.
Dude, they offered me a Heisman ballot like 15 years ago, and I literally said, no offense, I'm not qualified. I don't sit around and watch 40 college football tapes every week the way Mel Kiper and Phil Savage do. It's like, give that to someone who, I mean, I'm qualified to vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame and the NFL, but that's probably it, when it comes down to like really, and the Heisman, people had ballots who have no business having a ballot, Joe, right?
Oh, there are hundreds. Yeah, there are hundreds across the country. To me, when they took the Heisman away, that's when I stopped. I just felt like that was so hypocritical and absurd, and so I just stopped voting for the Heisman. But look, I think it's really, really tough. Everybody, specifically the Baseball Hall of Fame, which is obviously the one that we know the most about. That's tough. People have very, very different views about what it should be and how exclusive it should be, and they're very, very passionate about it. And you get so everybody has this feeling, oh, if you do or don't vote for Tim Raines, it's like it's a national catastrophe one way or another, and that's a shame. I mean, it's still supposed to be fun, and it's still supposed to be and that's what I try to do. I mean, when I'm in the middle of writing a daily sort of Hall of Fame thing where I'm writing about everybody on the ballot. And what I wanted to do this year, and what I've wanted to do the last few years, but particularly this year, is celebrate all those guys on the ballot. They were all great players, every one of them. Every player, from down to the last person on there. has a great story. They were in Major League Baseball for all these years. You know how hard that is. And so, my feeling on it is it should be much more fun than it is. There's no question that steroids cut into that, but it should be a lot more fun than it is, in my view.
Man, you and I were in those locker rooms with those jars of whatever the hell. I used to see David Segui making milkshakes in front of me and Scott Erickson, and the Orioles clubhouse, my press pass aside, is probably the filthiest of all of them, quite frankly, when it comes to me. They signed Grimsley after he, was involved, and Segui and, all sorts of guys. And then there are guys like Curt Schilling who just aren't popular, right? So full disclosure with me is Curt Schilling's wife was my best friend growing up. Curt Schilling used to sleep on the couch across the street from my mother's house in Dundalk when he was broke and trying to make his way in Tucson after he got traded away. I saw him in Philadelphia. I saw all the hard work. I saw the steroid era. I saw what kind of pitcher he was. And now I used to follow him on Facebook until I just couldn't take it anymore. After the third time I vomited on the second day, I just had to unfollow. And, I'm not allowed to say the S word here that rhymes with shit, but he's bat ship, on political issues and, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, as you point out, yes. Will he get elected? 0% chance. And, that's where we are now is that, guys like you have ballots and, people get their feelings hurt. And I can't say that Curt Schilling has not offended me over the course of time, quite frankly. So,
yeah, it's a tough one. Look, it's for me, it's not that tough because my view on it is the best players should go to the Hall of Fame. That's just my view. And
now that's your view with needles or without, right?
I would put this caveat: once they started testing, and once they started bringing, and actually bringing punishments, I think you have to take that into consideration. I think before they started testing, I just don't think it's fair. I don't. Baseball clearly at that point didn't care. They were basically tacitly encouraging players to do whatever they had to do.
They sanctioned it.
Sure they did.
Yes.
Sure they did. Yeah. So my view is before they started testing, I just don't think you can justify, these were the best players and those were the rules that they were playing under. Not, you don't mark them off. You can mark them off and mark them down some, but how much would you have to mark down Roger Clemens or Barry Bonds in order to say they weren't Hall of Fame players? That to me is pretty ridiculous. So
it's fascinating to me how some guys are dirty and some guys are clean, though, right? Like Messina, Schilling, Ripken, all considered clean and they're in. And then there's the definite dirty guys, right? Like A-Rod, Clemens, the guys that were Bonds. And then there's the in-betweeners where maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Meanwhile, Mike Piazza's running around and has a bust now. There's an injustice even after the injustice, and I know Schilling was one of those frontline guys saying, look, I'm kind of fat. I don't take steroids and have to pitch against them every day. And 75, no 50, no 25. Well, I don't really know what percentage it was. We've been playing this game most of our adult lives now, Joe, right? Literally.
Well, we have, and we're never going to figure it out. And your point is 100% right. The players we have decided are clean, we have no evidence for that at all. None. And we never will find it. Look, you cannot prove a negative. You just can't. So once you decide somebody, he might be dirty, he might be clean, you're never going to be able to prove didn't use steroids.
Well, look at Palmeiro. There's no greater case, underneath of our nose, speaking of in our clubhouse and in the Texas Rangers clubhouse. And, he was indicted in the court of Jose Canseco, of course, as well in his book. There's Palmeiro. Go look at the back of his bubblegum card and look at his body of work. And of guys I don't like, boy, there are very few dudes I was around who are worse dudes than Rafael Palmeiro, quite frankly, on a personal level. But if I had a ballot and I had to play judge, you'd have to put him in, right?
Well, then 500 homers, 3,000 hits. I think it's so difficult because there's so many people on the ballot who have put up big numbers in the 90s. You have to judge those numbers on the time they played. There's so many things to consider, but I think the hardest part to me is this idea that we've just decided who's clean. We've just decided, well, this person did it the right way. How do we know? How do we know that they did it the right way? We don't. Once they started testing, once they started caring, now we can start making real judgments. And look, this person, you might think they did, but they never failed to test, and you can't say this or that. But before they started testing, how in the world are you supposed to make the judgments that this person is clean, this person is dirty? It's just, I just think it's absurd, and I think it's hurt. I think it's, like I say, we were talking about this before. I think it's made the Hall of Fame so much less fun and so much less of what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about celebrating the game. That's why it's there. It's the only reason it's there. And instead, it's not really celebrating the game. At least it has in the last few years.
He is Joe Posnanski. No one does it better. Jay Posnanski out on Twitter and at NBC Sports as well. He writes books. He writes columns. They're usually long. Joe, this is where I'm going to put my feet up and start the year. Before I get to Springsteen, I want to talk about journalism with you. You're a decorated writer. You're one of my favorite writers to read. And, the reading thing, politics aside and the fact that the guy we just elected, we use loosely, as president, doesn't read books. You write books. I've written books. I read books. It's generally how I learn and figure my way through the world, is reading, not the video part of this, because I'm a little bit of an older cat. I had so many people come up to me and say, I don't read new books, when the Ravens won the Super Bowl 3 years ago and I wrote a book about it. I don't know where sports writing's going, and I don't know where journalism's going, but this week I've had to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles guys and what happened in their press box last week. You've been in the media as long as I have. It's certainly going a different kind of direction with team websites and with PR and whatnot. And when I say they don't need us, they really don't need us. I mean, if every sports writer went away, they would not lose any PSLs. They would not lose any TV revenue. And good writing would go away, and there would just be, state-run sports, right? I mean, literally.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, what you're saying is definitely the trend. I mean, there's no question that teams are taking, and sports are taking a lot more of this in-house. But here's the thing, and look, this might be just me being totally ridiculous and optimistic, and just because this is my life and this is my profession, and same thing with you. I don't sports without storytelling. To me, I don't think sports can survive long term without storytelling. Now, there's different kinds of storytelling and all of that, but there has to be a reason. There's a million going on all the time, and certain ones fascinate us and certain ones don't. And it's not because necessarily these games are superior to other games. It's because of the storytelling that goes along with it. It's because of the history. It's because of our connection, because of the towns that we live in. And I really do believe that sports is going to, and I think people are finding this. Sports are not going to be as popular if they're not great stories to go with them. I mean, I just think you have to know who these people are. You want to know what they're about.
You have to care. You have to you have to care about something. And I in the NFL now, Joe, I go around. People care about their fantasy stats. And they care about getting hammered before the game, at the games.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that they really know much about football. I've sat here for 21 years trying to educate people about 3-4 defenses and nickel packages and, what a left guard does and, the difference between a spread offense. And there are, 5% of the people that are into sports because, they actually dig the games. The other 95% is about wearing a pink Todd Heap jersey or, who's on my fantasy team, or I want to get a Wheaties box autographed so I can put it on eBay. Or I feel like I touch a lot of it. And a lot of it now is let's fire the coach, fire the quarterback, fire the coordinator. Everyone just wants to mouth off at this point because everyone is a sports writer now, right?
Well, part of that is true. I mean, obviously, everybody has an opinion about that. I'll tell you what I think. I mean, I think you mentioned it. I mean, I'm going to write baseball. That's what I do now. I mean, that's where my focus is. And I got to tell you, and this is obviously people will disagree with it. I think football's in trouble. I mean, look, it's going to be hugely successful because it is. It's the biggest sport in our country. But I think that the interest level of people is very, very thin. That's why I think numbers were down this year. It's very, very, it's people care, but it's very surface caring. It's not like the NBA where I think people are really into the NBA. It's not like hockey where those hockey fans are incredibly into the sport. It's not like baseball. I think people have a very, very thin, there are obviously some very intense football fans out there, but percentage-wise, the big numbers are because of the spectacle of it, because of their fantasy teams, because of gambling, because of all those things that you were talking about. And as football runs into more and more problems with concussions and with, various other issues that they're going through, I think football's got some issues, and I think that I think football's going to hurt a little bit. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's how I see it.
He is Joe Posnanski, Jay Posnanski, out on Twitter as well as at NBC Sports. He writes curiously long pieces as well as at his personal blog at joeposnanski.com and Joe Blogs. All right, let's get on to what's really important here. It's 2017. I have not had a Bruce Springsteen conversation. You wrote a Born to Run piece. I need to get more Bruce into the show in 17. My wife and I are slated, and my wife's a two-time leukemia battler, and we're day-to-day around here, much like every pitching rotation, right?
Sure.
But we're expecting to be in Auckland on the last night of the tour on February 25th. Some thoughts that maybe there is no more E Street after that, Joe?
Yeah, well, obviously E Street has been, slowly disappearing on us, which has been one of the saddest parts of the last few years with Bruce. But still so much energy and enthusiasm. I wouldn't count it out. I wouldn't count out there being more Bruce. I mean, he's insatiable. Obviously, I mean his hunger for the stage and his hunger to just be part of this big communal thing. It's really, really cool. It's interesting because this week I turned 50 years old. This week. So I'm actually writing a piece now about turning 50 and Bruce and his impact on my life. I think he's an inspiration in that way. I mean, this is a guy, you look at rock and roll's for young people. And yet you look at Bruce, and Bruce is 66 now and still going and still full of energy. And, that's, when you get to our age, you start looking for people that you can sort of say, hey, you know what? Life goes on. I mean,
I can still be cool 15 years from now. Look at him.
Exactly. Look at that guy. He's still going, and he's still awesome. And
I told people last summer, right? So I saw the River Tour about 14 times before he left Barclays and did Purple Rain. And my wife and I were supposed to go to Europe. My wife got sick again last summer, and so we didn't make it to Paris. We didn't make it to Rome. And then he came back and did the stadiums, and those were the marathons, right? And there was no pre-announcement like, bring your dancing shoes because we're going to go 4 hours tonight. It was sort of like, well, it's Bruce. It's at least going to go 3:20. It always does, right? And then those stadium shows happened at the end of the summer, and I had friends that went to those shows, and I said, this is the most amazing thing because I've seen Leonard Skinner lately and Bryan Adams and Kiss, and go down the list of any of those people. Journey that we grew up with, Styx, Rush. They called it quits 2 summers ago, and there's this sad movie that's made about Rush, but Bruce. If you go and see him in 2017, it's just as good as it was in 1981, and I can prove it. I have the DVDs, and I was there. It hasn't diminished. It's changed, but there's no saying you would go see Roger Clemens or Cal Ripken play baseball now and say it's as good as it ever was. There's very few things in life you could say that about, I think.
Yeah, he's a rarity. And look, I went and saw the Rolling Stones a few years ago,
and it's not as good as it used to be.
No, and look, I'm not the world's biggest Rolling Stones fan, but I thoroughly admire what they are and what they used to be. And you go see them, and you're like, okay, look, this is like, you know what it's like? It's like going to an old timers game where it's like, oh yeah, you know what? You could see what they used to be. You can still feel a little bit of the old energy, but they're not the same. Bruce is the same. He's the same. He's just as energetic on stage. He's just as much fun. It's just as sort of mesmerizing as it's ever been. And I have friends that I talk to that don't get it. They've never been Springsteen fans, and so they don't quite get it. And I say, look, you just need to go to a show. You just need to go to one show, even now. And it's impossible, even if you're not a huge fan of the music, it's impossible not to get caught up in what it is. And it's great that you're getting to go see him, and obviously I'm always hoping that for you and your wife, and that's going to be such a blast for you guys.
Valentine's night in the Pit in Brisbane. I think Tunnel of Love will be played. What do you think?
I think so. You got to hold the sign up. You got to bring the sign. so he can get Tunnel Love up there.
Somebody else will bring a Tunnel of Love sign that night. It's Australia, though. They're low-key over there. Hey, did you like the book? I haven't read the book. I had never met Springsteen. I got one of the questions in at the NFL press conference 10 years ago. Bruce called me a dummy. It's on video. It's true. The one time I ever asked Bruce Springsteen a question, he called me a dummy, which I think is great. And then I got to actually shake his hand in of all places, his hometown, the first day of the book tour. I hit the lottery. No inside job at all. Just actually drove to Jersey and shook his hand and took a picture with him. It was momentous, but I still haven't read the book. So I'm going to read the book on the way to Australia. I figure I have plenty of time on my hands.
Yeah, you'll have time to do it. The book is great. The book is fantastic. It's a big part of the piece I'm writing. I mean, it's him, and he's very, very honest. It's all the things that make him great as a performer. Is that he's honest, he puts himself out there, he's not self-referential at all, as these autobiographies tend to be. He's very, very hard on himself, but at the same time he knows, hey, he's Bruce Springsteen. I mean, it's not like he can go out there and be overly modest either. He finds that great middle ground. It's beautifully written, he's a great writer. You'll love it. You'll love the book.
Storytelling, imagine, that might catch on, Joe.
I hope so.
Hey, man, love your work. I appreciate your time, as always. I'm excited that you're covering baseball. Hey, when you come to Baltimore for an Orioles game, we can sit in the stands together. They don't let me in the press box, but they do let me in the stadium, and I know where to get cheap dogs.
That's all I need.
That's all you need, cheap dogs, and I have cold beer anytime for you, Joe Posnanski. Appreciate your time, man. We'll be following your work.
Thank you.
You got it. Joe Posnanski from NBC Sports joining us here talking. Let's see. I promised Lefty Driesell, Baseball Hall of Fame, and Bruce Springsteen. And we even snuck some Kurt Schilling and some steroids in there. So God bless you. You can find anything you miss here in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere you are. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life at Planet Fitness. Last but never least, if Dan Duquette comes out of a dumpster with a fifth outfielder, and that's breaking news, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis is here every Thursday with the SSV on WNST. I am a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.